Hello neighbors, and welcome back to the channel. I am Ariana from The Therapist Next Door. So today I'm going to be talking all about the biggest relationship mistakes. I pulled together this list based on my experience as a therapist for the past several years and also my own experiences in my own relationships. This list is by no means comprehensive, but I think it's a pretty good list based on what I've seen and what I've experienced. I'm going to be going over these mistakes in the hopes that it will help you be more aware when these things are happening, potentially avoid making these mistakes, and also talk about what to do instead. So let's dive right in. The first one is having a tit for tat mentality. So oftentimes I see this when I work with couples where they start to get into this mentality of not doing things or doing things based on their partner or their partner's behavior. So my partner didn't do that, so I'm not gonna do it. Or they were yelling, so I'm gonna yell too. That kind of mentality will really result in unhealthy dynamics, lower frequency, and toxic relationships. It's not anything that I want anybody to feel bad about because it really can happen and it does happen a lot. But if you want to have a healthier relationship, what to do instead is to think about the we instead of the I. Hopefully, both of you and your partner can approach the relationship by thinking about what you can do that can improve the relationship despite what your partner is doing. A lot of this involves taking the high road, which is incredibly difficult, but that is what I would suggest to think about instead. So prioritizing the we over the I will really help battle that tit for tat dynamic. The next relationship mistake would be avoidance. Again, this is something that is super common. Reason being usually is because we grew up in a family where our parents or our family members didn't openly discuss issues as they were coming up, or when they did, it came out in very ugly ways. And so what happens is we almost develop a negative association with communication or with conflict resolution because we think it'll always result in a really negative experience that involves yelling or crossing boundaries. But the problem with this is that if we avoid bringing issues up as they come up, then it doesn't give our partner the opportunity to correct their behavior or to address it, and resentment will build. What you want to do instead of avoiding is you want to have regular feedback loops. Obviously, this will require courage in terms of being courageous to bring things up as they happen. You want to use I statements when you bring things up, and if you're the one listening, you want to practice reflective listening instead of listening to react or to defend. I'll get into that more a little bit later, but you want to bring up issues as they come. Now, another way of doing this in feedback loops is in using weekly check-ins. So every week you're going to have an opportunity, and your partner will as well, to provide each other with both positive and constructive feedback. And so this will really help you get out of those avoidant patterns of communication. The next four I'm going to discuss come from the Gottman Institute, and they call them the 4 Horsemen. And so basically they did all this research where they could predict divorce, I think within an 80% prediction rate based on if these 4 things were present in a marriage or in a relationship. The first one is criticism. You want to be mindful of when you give your partner feedback or constructive feedback that it doesn't come out as overly critical, because what's going to happen is your partner is going to constantly not feel good enough, and that is going to create resentment and issues with intimacies. A lot of times, again, we do this because it was something that was done to us as children. You had a really critical parent, or you find yourself having perfectionism issues. Chances are that it's something that did come from your childhood and that you are bringing into your relationships as an adult. So you really kind of want to bring awareness here. You want to watch how you're delivering feedback and make sure it's happening in a constructive way and not so much in a critical way where your partner is feeling put down all the time. So that's the first horse. The second horse is contempt. That sounds like a really big, scary word, but believe it or not, I do see this a lot in relationships as as well. So when you get into a lot of conflict, maybe your relationship has gotten a bit toxic, you really start to have more of a negative view of your partner, and this can get you into a lot of trouble. And so what happens is that you may find yourself making faces at them, you're rolling your eyes, you're constantly negating their opinion. Those are all examples of contempt, just having kind of that negative disposition towards your partner. I think that it's pretty obvious that this is not healthy and this is not what people want, but again, this is something that can happen over time. You really want to be mindful if this is happening in your relationship, and some of the things that you can do is have a better balanced view of your partner. Remember why you're with them, some of the positive things about them, and try your best to have a more positive demeanor towards your partner. And I think if both people are aware of this and they're working on it, it can be really helpful. Now, the third horse is defensiveness. So this is a really, really big one. I go into this a lot in my videos where I talk about communication and I statements and reflective listening. Most of us, again, because of what we saw in our own childhood, we are oftentimes listening to defend ourselves or to react, or we're just waiting for our turn to talk. When our partner shares something that's bothering them and they're able to be vulnerable and we meet them with defensiveness, it's just not a path forward to resolution. Your partner doesn't feel heard and you might be feeling attacked, and really there's nowhere good to go from there. The best thing that you can do if you're finding yourself being defensive is to remember that you're human. You're not perfect. You're gonna make mistakes. You're going to do things that are going to upset your partner. That's going to happen in every single relationship. Just humble yourself. Be open to listening to what that is. Be open to receiving feedback. And again, part of that taking the high road is take care of your partner in that moment and try to listen. You may not agree with what they're saying. You may not have intended to upset them, but that still happened. So the best thing that you can do is just listen with an open heart and an open mind and try to see if you can repair. So just let your partner know, I hear you. I'm sorry I made you feel that way. Thank you for sharing that with me, and I'm going to work on that. If both of you approach your conversations and your conflict resolution this way, you will find a lot of that defensiveness will start to decrease. Now, the last one is stonewalling. What this means is basically you get upset with your partner and then you give them the cold shoulder. In some relationships, this could go on for minutes, hours, even days. And so what happens is you give your partner the cold shoulder, and then after a while, the feelings start to get less intense, and then you kind of pretend like nothing happened and you start talking and acting normal again. This happens a lot. I actually saw this in my own childhood growing up, and so it's something that I have to be really mindful of in my relationships. The best thing you can do instead of stonewalling is let your partner know, I'm upset right now, I'm not quite ready to dive in, I love you, but I need some space. And just be very specific in terms of what that space is. You know, can you give me an hour or two, or I might be a little quiet for the rest of the day. I want you to know I still love you, but I'm just working through some things and I'd like to have time and be calm to talk about it at a later time. So that's what you can do instead of stonewalling, because stonewalling can be very, very damaging to your relationship as well. Okay, the next one would be related to anger, losing your cool, crossing boundaries. Again, we're all human and this is going to happen. We're gonna get angry, we're gonna get upset with our partner. And in fact, our brain functioning changes when we experience anger. We actually start to go into more of the animal brain and we lose the ability to be more logical. It's important not to judge yourself when that happens, but more so be aware of your anger and be able to take a time out, be able to step away to cool down so that you don't say or do anything that you can't take back and that your partner may forgive you for, but they're never really going to be able to forget. And over time, the more those things happen, the more they damage your connection and trust and intimacy and your relationship overall. When you're finding yourself getting really angry or reaching a boiling point, make sure that you verbalize that you need a timeout. And if you're on the receiving end, you are also able to verbalize, hey, I don't like the way you're speaking to me. Can we take a break and come back? And always come back when you say that you're gonna come back. Okay, the last one is a little tricky. I think that a mistake that a lot of us make sometimes is talking too much to our friends and family about our relationship issues. I do have some mixed feelings about this because I think that as human beings, we do need to process and dialogue with our friends and let them know what's going on. But I also think that when we do that too much, it can violate the couple bubble and the boundaries of our relationship. And what can also happen is that those opinions can influence how you feel about your partner, because your friends and family have a biased perspective and feel protective of you. The advice that they give you may be advice that is really well-meaning, but also maybe not the best advice, or at least not unbiased advice, like the feedback that you would get from a therapist or a counselor, anybody like that. Again, it's not that I think you should never talk about your relationship, but think about maybe taking some time to process on your own a little bit, maybe talk to a therapist first if you can, and then you may want to keep things a little bit more vague. You know, we're having some issues, or we had a bad night, but you know, we're trying to work it through, because again, what can happen is you can't really unspill the milk once your friends and family know all the intricate details of your relationship. And again, because as human beings, we tend to have a negative bias, your friends and family may also start to look at your partner differently. And if you do choose to stay with your partner, this, you know, can create some uncomfortable dynamics for everybody. Once again, this was not a comprehensive or exhaustive list, but it's a pretty good list of some of the relationship mistakes that you can be mindful of, that you can avoid by using the tools that I reviewed in this video. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I look forward to connecting with you guys soon. Authentically yours, Ariana.